Revelation chapter 8 and 9, be reading both chapters. Hear the word of the Lord. When the Lamb opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Then I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and seven trumpets were given to them, and another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Now the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared to blow them. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and those were thrown upon the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water, because it had been made bitter. The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and the third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened, and a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night. Then I looked, and I heard an eagle crying with a loud voice as it flew directly overhead, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, at the blast of the other trumpets that the three angels are about to blow." And the fifth angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star falling from heaven to earth, and he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. He opened the shaft of the bottomless pit, and from the shaft rose smoke like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened with the smoke from the shaft. Then from the smoke came locusts on the earth, and they were given power like the power of scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth, or any green plant, or any tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were allowed to torment them for 5 months, but not to kill them. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings someone. And in those days, people will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. In appearance, the locusts were like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were what looked like crowns of gold. Their faces were like human faces, their hair like women's hair, and their teeth like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the noise of their wings was like the noise of many chariots with horses rushing into battle. They had tails and stings like scorpions, and their power to hurt people for 5 months is in their tails. They have as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he is called Apollyon. The first woe has passed. Behold, 2 woes are still to come. Then the sixth angel blew his trumpet, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, "Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." So the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and the year were released to kill a third of mankind. The number of the mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number. And this is how I saw the horses in my vision, and those who rode them. They wore breastplates, the color of fire and of sapphire and of sulfur. And the heads of the horses were like lions' heads, and fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. By these 3 plagues, a third of mankind was killed, by the fire and smoke and sulfur coming out of their mouths. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents with heads, and by means of them they wound. The rest of mankind, who were not killed by these plagues, did not repent of their works of their hands, nor give up their worshiping demons and idols of gold and silver and bronze and stone and wood, which cannot see or hear or walk, nor did they repent of their murders or their sorceries or their sexual immorality or their thefts. May the Lord add his blessings to the reading of his holy word. Well, have you ever been surprised about where you are or what time it is? Maybe you thought you were almost home on a long trip and you find out you still got like an hour or so to go. Or maybe you're at work and you thought, well, you're done. Time to go. And you look at the clock and say, well, you still got a couple more hours. One of the keys to running a good race is knowing exactly where you are in it so you have enough energy to finish the race. Well, I found that out of my very first track race, running 2 miles, 8 laps, when I miscounted the laps, thinking I was at the end, and it was really the 7th lap. I ran out of gas, ended the race with a slow jog, coming in last. If you can, always know where you are relative to the end. That should be easy running on the track, but it's a lot harder running cross country. About 8 or 9 years ago, I ran a 5K race at Anglers Park over their trails and their hills there. I'd never run on them before, so I didn't know the course at all. After a while, in the midst of the race, it's a lot of twists and turns and a lot of trees. You can't see there's people in front of you. I had no idea how far ahead I had left to go. It's very hilly, slows you down, so I couldn't tell by the time how far into the race I was. Thinking, when is this going to end? It's supposed to be only 5K, it's only at 3.1 miles. And then suddenly the trail empties into this gravel road, and about 50 yards to my right is the finish line. So I ran through it. No one said anything. I assumed other runners had finished already. I just sit down. Someone comes by and asks how I did. I said, lousy. I thought my time was bad. Other runners finished. And after a while, someone posted the results, and I went to go look at it to see how I did. And I stared at it. Couldn't believe what I was seeing. I blinked. I asked the guy sitting nearby, is this for real? Is this some kind of joke? Well, why would they be playing a joke on me? They don't care about me. They don't know me. It took me a few seconds, but it finally sank in. I won the race. It's good to know where you are. Sometimes you might be pleasantly surprised. One of the odd things about being middle-aged, into upper middle age now, is that you don't really know where you are in your lifespan. And when you're young, you think, well, you have a whole life ahead of you, have a lot of time, so you invest your life in your future, go to college, so forth. And when you're old, 70 or 80 or above, you know you're pretty much near the end. You might start checking things off your bucket list. But when you're like 60, you realize, you could collapse tonight and not even be that unusual to die that age. Or you could be healthy and have all your faculties for another 30 years. You have no idea where you are in your lifespan. Do you buy a burial plot now? Or do you take a course at the community college? You don't know. The most common question people ask about Revelation is, are we in the end times yet? Are we there, almost there yet? Well, they want to know where we are. Can I stop paying my rent or stop going to work and not have to worry about being evicted because I'll be raptured before the landlord serves the eviction notice or whatever? Or should I be putting money away for retirement because I'm going to be here for a long time? Are we in the end times yet? Well, the answer is yes, definitely. And the end times could last a lot longer. We've been in the end times since Jesus was on earth, so it could be another 2,000 years of end times before he returns and then finally ends the end times. So we don't know, is the point. We don't know how far we have to go. It could be another 2,000 years, or we could end up being caught away before we get to Geraldine's cake out there. We don't know. And we see that here. We see that we're on the very verge of the end, but we've also seen that we've been there on the verge of the end for a long time. And it might be a long time more, or not. We see that here in two very uneven parts, the seventh seal and the 7 trumpets. We've been waiting for the 7th seal since chapter 5. Remember, there were supposed to be 7 seals, and he who sits on the throne had a scroll, the scroll of destiny. He was sealed with those 7 seals. The Lamb is worthy, so he begins to unseal destiny, and then come the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and then 2 others, the martyrs, praying for justice, and then the cosmic disruption. Now, think about that. Were they strictly sequential? That is, one after another. Did the gospel go out first, and then when it was done, then war went out, and then after war came scarcity, and then after all that, death, kind of in order? That's why many people interpret the seals to be saying, but in actual history, in our experience, is that how it strikes us? Well, no, of course not. War brings scarcity and death immediately. They all come together as far as we experience. They're all part of the same mix that is in this world as we know it. So where are we? Well, we are after the 6th seal. Remember then there was an interlude after the sixth seal. There's supposed to be 7 seals. Think about this pattern, because the pattern will happen again. First they announce a 7, and you get all through 6, one after another pretty rapidly, and then they stop after 6. There's an interlude. There's a break, a pause. So we're still waiting for the 7th. There's this pause right on the verge of the end. Now during that break, God's people are sealed. God seals his people. Remember the 144,000 of all the Israel of God? A great multitude from every ethnicity, and they're the same people. Well, that's where we are. We're in this sealing time. We're right on the verge of the end. Nothing more needs to happen before the end, before Jesus returns. Nothing has to happen before Jesus can return. The church does not have to take over the world and make it perfect before he returns. There does not have to be a rapture and a 7-year tribulation before he returns. None of that. We already saw that right now, this great multitude is being sealed by God, and they're currently, right now, coming, present tense, out of the great tribulation, which means that this is the great tribulation, this interlude that we're in, and it could end any time. The next thing is the 7th seal. That will end it all. And when the Lamb opens it in chapter 8, verse 1, it is the end. So when he does, there's silence in heaven, like something truly awe-inspiring. Something you've been waiting for a long, long time has finally happened. The prayers have been answered. God's kingdom has finally come. The end. It's greeted with total silence, as if there's no words that can describe, can express what this means. Now, some things are so far beyond words that the only thing to do is to be quiet. You can't express it. The Lord is in his holy temple. That all the earth keeps silence before him. In Habakkuk 2, verse 20. Here the Lord is he who sits on the throne. He tabernacles over his people so that they are protected. They are protected because the Lamb shepherds them. And then finally, after so many prayers of your kingdom come, it does. And that's the end. History is over. God wipes away all our tears, and there's total silence. Silence is the effect of awe. Silence before the Lord is the result of knowing that only he can fulfill his plan, and he has. He's done it. Not because we cajoled him to, we nagged him to with our nonstop words. We realize that our words cannot manipulate God. That's why I usually end my sermon with a moment of silence. Ever notice that? Just silent. Thinking, praying, God, we can't move you. We can't manipulate you with our magic words. Not if I say another something more that makes God move. No. So, hush. There was silence for half an hour. A respectable amount of time. Can you imagine being totally silent in a large crowd, enormous crowd for a full half hour? Well, then the praise will start again. After all, this is the end. You might think, well, this can't be the end. This is only chapter 8. We're in a 22-chapter book. We still have a lot more. You might think, well, we're nearer the beginning than the end. Well, no. Know where you are. You're in Revelation. And this book is not meant to be sequential or linear, like it's one long narrative, a continuous story that doesn't reach the end until chapter 22. We're at the end now in chapter 8, and now we start over, approaching the end from another route. Like if someone asks you, well, how to go to Greensboro? Well, you can go to the expressway, go up a little bit north here, expressway, go west, then 29 south, and you'll reach the end. Or start over. Start over from here. Go down 86, go to Yanceyville, go down 158, go west, then veer off on those country roads. You'll get to the end that way. Or let's start over. Go back down to Yanceyville, go down 62 to Burlington. Then when you get there, go to I-40 west. About twice as long as the other way, but you can go that way too. Or let's just do all three. So that way you know all about how to get to Greensboro. You know every way to get there. Here, we're going to the end. And we go through seals, then we start over. And we go through trumpets. It's a different way to the same destination. We'll start over again, as we'll see. We see patterns and parallelisms. We will see some seals are like some trumpets, but there's also differences. We'll see some different things on different routes to the end. The point is that Revelation is not to be read linearly, one event after another in chronological order, as if it were the tick-tock, the sequence of events, as if the 7 seals lead then to the 7 trumpets and into the 7 bowls and so forth, until finally, through all that, we get to the end. I don't think so. Why does each one end with this kind of celebration? Tears are wiped away and there's silence in heaven. It looks like the end to me. I think it shows us several paths to the end. The seals path, the trumpets path, the bowls path. Each of them overlap some, showing us some of the same things, maybe from different angles, and each of them shows us some unique things. I said we're breaking down the passage into 2 very uneven parts. Well, the first part is just chapter 8, verse 1. Just that one verse. When the Lamb, Jesus, opens the 7th seal, there was silence, an awestruck hush in heaven for about half an hour. It's stunning that finally he actually did it. He brought us to the end. Then the rest of the passage, from chapter 8, verse 2, to the end of chapter 9, we start over on our way back to the end. And it's about the trumpets. Second, the 7 trumpets. Then in verse 2, we're starting over. Where are we now? We were right on the verge of the end. And then it was the end, silence. Now in chapter 8, verse 2, we're starting over. We come to the end with the seals. Now let's go another way to the end. We start over with John seeing 7 angels who stand before God, each given 7 trumpets. Meanwhile, another angel comes to the altar, the true one in heaven, with a golden censer, a pan made out of gold, meant to hold burning hot coals, into which incense is put, burns the incense, and it lets out this plume of this wonderful aroma, great smell. And this angel is given much incense, this time with the prayers of the saints. How do you have prayers? How are you with them? Well, that's symbolic, okay? The saints here are not just a particularly few, very rare, holy, kind of heroic stars of the past, but they're any true Christian. Saints are holy ones. They're one of God's people. We already saw in chapter 5, verse 8, remember the true incense is the prayers of the saints. It said holding a bowl, golden bowl full of the incense, which is the prayers of the saints. Here is another way of saying the same thing. Incense and prayers are mixed together, and they're offered before God. They make a pleasing aroma. They please God. God here not only just hears the prayers, he smells them. Well, what are the prayers? Well, among other things, your kingdom come. You think all those years you prayed for something, for a family member to be converted, for righteousness to prevail, for justice. You might think, well, nothing happened. I waited and I prayed and I prayed. No, it is offered to God as if it were incense. And in verse 4, the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God. You think God cares about incense and smell? He doesn't care about that. He cares about the prayers. He receives it like we might receive incense. He responds well to it, to our prayers. It rose before God from the hand of the angel. So he feels our prayers. It will bring about the trumpets. The angel in verse 5 fills the censer with fire, setting your prayers on fire, and throws your prayers onto the earth where God's kingdom is coming. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, literally the word there is voices, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. These are manifestations of God. They sound like God at Mount Sinai when Moses got the law. The mountain shook. It was obscured by smoke. Lightning flashed out. When Jesus was transfigured, there was a voice from heaven. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. And a cloud descended on them. When Jesus was on the cross, there was an earthquake. God was revealing himself. He reveals himself through trumpets here. And with all these other things, these manifestations. So with God manifesting himself, the 7 angels in verse 6 set the trumpets to their lips, ready to blow. First trumpet in verse 7, there's hail and fire mixed with blood. Now hail doesn't seem so unusual. That's one of the plagues from Egypt. Remember, God's judges with hail. Hail's kind of small. It may not be too bad. If it's big, it can really be something. My car out there still bears the scars of a hailstorm. Fire, God often uses to judge. We saw that in Psalm 21. That may you set out your fire to judge, to burn up. We see that in Genesis with Sodom and Gomorrah. The blood shows that the death that will result from this hail and this fire. Now here, the result of the first trumpet is that a third of the earth is seared, a third of the trees are burned. There's now a lot of thirds among the trumpets. Once among the seals, there was a fourth of people were killed. Here is thirds. It's escalating. It's getting worse. Third is a substantial number, but it's not all. It's not even a majority. It's not even most, although all green grass is burned up. Now, the literalist will say, and some people think if you're criticizing being literal, it means you're criticizing the Bible itself. No, I'm saying the way you do interpret it. Literalists will say, well, you interpret even this literally. You just have to say, well, this is exactly what will happen. Not symbolic of anything. There's going to be a massive hailstorm. Imagine a hailstorm that covers a third of the planet. That would be something. Now, hail would not be too unusual. What's really weird is that hail is mixed with fire, which of course would melt the hail. I mean, hail is ice. So how can there be ice and fire mixed together? How does that work? And there's blood mixed in too. So where does the blood come from? Right? If you're reading it strictly literally. So there's hail and fire and blood coming down from the sky. How does the blood get up into the atmosphere in order to fall back down? Which somehow, with the fire, is somehow not melting the ice. How does that work? Now, I'm not mocking or criticizing the Bible or Revelation. I believe the Bible. I'm mocking the literalistic interpretation, especially of Revelation. I'm showing that it doesn't make any sense, especially here. And think what it does to people who believe that we have to wait for a sign of a massive hailstorm, covers a third of the earth. Not only does hail fall with fire and blood mixed in it before the end comes. We've got to look for that before the end. They'll think the end is never coming. Then what are we to make of this? You say it's not literal. It doesn't mean nothing. It means something. I believe the trumpet and this trumpet and the others are not meant to be pressed for details, as though every little detail will happen, or even that it symbolizes something that's a lot like it. Like this is about bombings from the air. Could it be that? Incendiary bombs? Hail represents that. Maybe a nuclear weapons that bring fire and blood, which death. Probably not. I think first it's meant to convey a general feeling, a mood of foreboding, of great disaster. You can imagine how disastrous it is to have huge hail and fire and blood coming down. That's disastrous. Doesn't mean that exactly has to happen. Something disastrous is on that scale. Hail was the seventh plague that struck Egypt in Exodus 9. So God is judging again. This time the whole world is Egypt. And there might be a nuclear war that leads to fire to burn up a third of the earth. But this trumpet in verse 7 and the other trumpets aren't meant to exactly predict that, but to show the enormous catastrophe that happens in this time, this interlude, before the end, this great tribulation. So know where you are. You're in Revelation. Revelation employs vivid symbolism, metaphorical language to communicate a feeling, a sense of how things will be, not necessarily the facts of what they will be. Reporting a half hour of total silence in heaven communicates a feeling, a sense of awe. A hailstorm that strikes 1/3 of the planet and comes with fire and blood, destroying a third of the vegetation and all grass, that conveys a sense of cataclysm and terror. Trumpets were often used in those days to call attention to some great announcement. In Joel 2, blow the trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm, because God is bringing judgment. Trumpets warn, like the Israelites blowing the trumpets. They circled Jericho. Judgment is coming to you, Jericho. The trumpets here then give a sense of impending danger. Instead of focusing on the literalistic details, it's got to be hail and fire mixed with blood falling out of the sky, obsessing over that, focus on the spiritual truths that are conveyed, that God is answering the prayers of your kingdom come. This shows that God is sovereign, all-powerful, even fearsome and gracious. In case you think of soft-selling it, whatever literally this shows will fulfill this, it will be just as bad as if hail and fire and blood fell out of the sky. Okay, it will be that bad. Second trumpet, in verse 8, something like, in other words, not exactly, but it's something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. Now, is this a volcano on the seashore erupting, or is it an asteroid, meteor striking the ocean? I don't think that's the point. The point is that devastating disasters come to the seas. The result is that, again, that's the third again, of the marine animals are killed, and a third of the ships are destroyed. The third trumpet, in verse 10, a great star, mega aster in Greek, fell out of the sky, burning like a torch, contaminates a third of the fresh water. Before it was the seas, now it's the fresh water. It even had a name, wormwood. This kind of root that made anything you put in it to look very bitter. So it made the water bitter, even poisonous, so that many people died. All of the environment now, the land, oceans, fresh water, are being contaminated. Next, the air. Fourth trumpet, verse 12. A third of the sun, the moon, the stars are struck. They are dimmed by 1/3, as if there was so much smoke and ash in the air. Everything is a third less bright. So everything is now dim and gray and bleak and depressing. Like if you've ever been somewhere where there's a lot of smog. So LA in a bad day. That's the first four. They form a unit together, just like with the seals. Remember the seals? The first four were the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Here, these first four are also distinct from the others that come. And with them, after the first four, John looks up in verse 13 and sees an eagle flying over him, so directly overhead. Eagle is a bird of war, and it cries out. It's a speaking eagle, so that's unusual. And it says, woe, woe, woe. 3 woes for the next 3 trumpets. It's an urgent cry of God's coming judgment and of impending doom. It's for all who dwell on the earth. Beware the blast of other trumpets that the 3 angels are about to blow. The eagle is warning them. The thrice repeated woe shows the certainty of the judgment and of its severity. As Abraham prayed, as God was planning the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? And God is answering the prayers for justice. So the only refuge from his righteous anger is Christ alone, who bore the wrath we deserve. Then in chapter 9 come the 2 more trumpets. The 5th trumpet, in chapter 9, verse 1, John sees a star, calls it a star, fall from the sky, come to earth. And he, notice that, who calls the star he? He was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. Obviously the star is not literal, is it? Again, a lot of this is about how you interpret it. Is the star that came to earth a literal, massive, self-luminous body of plasma held together by its own gravity, generating energy by nuclear fusion at its core? That's the technical definition of a star. Is that what it is? No, of course not. Here the word star is used as some lofty, powerful being, like Paul talked about principalities and powers. Like we might talk about a star. You know, there are a lot of basketball players, but Nikola Jokic is a star. There are a lot of actors, but Brad Pitt is a star. Here the star is a prominent being, and he has fallen. Right? It didn't say he just came down on his own. He's fallen, like he's pushed. Is this a picture of Satan? Yeah, probably. I think so. Jesus said in Luke chapter 10, verse 18, that he saw, as a result of his ministry, what he was doing, Satan fall out of heaven, like he's pushed out. Here, he's fallen, and he opens up. Now he's on heaven. He's on earth, that is, but he's fallen. He opens up a bottomless pit, which pictures opening a door to the demonic, the infernal forces of death, destruction. They were trapped because there was a latch on the bottomless pit. Now they are let loose. We're now going, at chapter 9, we're going from the natural disasters, we're in chapter 8, fire, the hail, the burned up trees and the grass, contaminated water and air, to supernatural disasters, the release of hellish forces on people. The demonic forces coming through the smoke out of the bottomless pit are compared, like locusts, mentions that a couple times. They're not really locusts, are they? They're kind of like them. What do locusts do? They go in hordes and they get into everything. But here, verse 3, they're like locusts. We're calling the judgment loosed on Israel in the book of Joel. where there were the waves there were literal locusts that God loosed to cover the land, devoured everything, and God judged them with that. They would be everywhere. They'd be in your house, and you open a cupboard, they're on your plates, everything. It'd be horrible. They're not literal locusts, there's something like it. They're demonic forces coming out, and like literal locusts, they get into everything. Now, some literalists have said, well, these are attack helicopters. They're armored. They have tails, helicopters kind of have tails, but they don't have tails like scorpions, whatever. They have something sticking out of their tail, something like that. Well, of course, obviously that's not a literal interpretation at all. Some of the same people, in other words, who say they got to interpret it literally, will say these are attack helicopters. Well, that's not literal. That's a modern reinterpretation of it. It's metaphorical, and it misses the point. Notice in chapter 9, verse 4, that these locusts are told not to harm the grass. Why would attack helicopters want to harm grass anyway? They wouldn't do that. But we just read that all grass was burned up. Remember that? So what grass are they eating? Well, that's because this is about details. Again, you don't press it for literal details, like it was a photograph. This is impressionistic. It's like a picture meant to convey, abstract picture meant to convey a feeling. And the feeling here is horror. We hear that these demonic locusts were given power, like the power of scorpions, or like that. In other words, they hurt people. They sting. Unlike literal locusts in verse 4, they don't harm plants, only people. Only those who do not have the seal of God on their forehead. So only not God's people. Not God's people are tormented by demonic forces crawling over all of society, infesting every institution. They torment people for 5 months, a significant time. It's the planting and growing season, 5 months. They don't kill them in verse 5. They weren't allowed to. Notice that. God controls what they can do. He can tell the demon, no, you can't kill. You can do only so much. Like in the book of Job, Satan can only do what God lets him do. They're on God's leash. But they make life miserable for people so that they want to die. These demonic locusts appear like little war horses with crowns, principalities and powers, maybe. Faces like men because they go after people. Hair like women's. I'm not sure what to make of that, but it's weird. Teeth like lions. They bite. They're armored like they're going to battle. And with their wings, they make a thundering sound as they move together in their hordes, as they spread their tormenting ideas. Atheism, materialism, Marxism, racism, feminism, transgenderism. They march on, infiltrating all of society, devouring all of culture, destroying lives, making life just miserable for people. And the king of the tormenting hellish forces is called Abaddon, Apollyon, the destroyer. Jesus said the thief comes only to kill, and to steal, and destroy. Now, aren't we living in an age of increasing misery and destruction? Our culture has rebelled against God, thinks it can reject God's law and live better than what God has said how to live. And the result is now, look at our people, particularly our young people. Young women are increasingly alcoholic, turning to the bottle to drown their miseries. Young men are increasingly angry, turning to ideologies and politics or violence, wondering why life has turned out like this. Why is society like this? They're unfulfilled, they're lonely, they're miserable. People are tormented by demonic ideas. That's the first woe and the fifth trumpet. Then the sixth trumpet, starting in verse 13. It's kind of like the fifth seal, if you remember. From the fifth seal, John heard the martyrs who were under the altar. So they were around the altar, they were under it, crying out to God for justice. Here, he hears again from the altar, in the sixth trumpet, he hears a voice from the four horns, like the four corners of it, kind of horns that jutted out. The four horns of the golden altar before God. A voice comes from that, from the altar. It says to the angel with the sixth trumpet, release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. Now we think, what does that mean to us? Well, the Euphrates was the boundary of the ideal promised land. What Israel, if it was righteous, should have their boundary there at the river Euphrates. Outside of it, on the other side of the Euphrates, was wild, barbaric, unpromised land, full of invaders, The invaders who destroyed Israel later would come over the Euphrates from the other side of it. There, 4 angels have been prepared. Notice the passive voice, been prepared by God, the implication. And they've been prepared for this exact moment, for this role, for the hour, the day, the month, and the year. This was their time. Know where you're at, angels. Now's your time. They were released to kill 1/3 of the people in verse 15. They're a vast horde of cavalry, twice 10,000 times 10,000. That's the way the ESV puts it. I think it's meant to be like that, just a vast number. Don't try to literally, it's 2 million. Well, no. Chinese soldiers coming. No, that's not it. They're equipped for war with breastplates that look like fire, sulfur and sapphire, a burning kind of green and orange and yellow. Their horses had lions' heads. Okay, that's really weird. They're cavalry, but they're riding horses that have the heads of lions. Normally, if your cavalry's coming, you're not too worried about the horse. Maybe it could trample you, but that's the worst it could do. These horses have lions' heads, so they could devour you. They could bite on you. They also breathed out fire, smoke, and sulfur. So they're fire-breathing, lion-headed horses. Okay, that is pretty bad. We're not done. They had snakes as their tails, probably poisonous snakes, we imagine. So imagine that. Lion head horse with snake at his tail sticking out the other side, and it breathes out fire and sulfur and smoke. The tail of a snake shows how satanic they are. They're like that ancient serpent, the devil. And they could hurt you either coming with their mouths and their fire breathing, or going with their serpent and their tails. But notice the emphasis, the focus is on their mouths. In verses 17, 19, 3 times their mouths are mentioned. They killed 1/3 of the people with the satanic ideas that came out of their mouths. Atheism, materialism, that life is just about things, it's about money. Communism, racism, that we're not one human race, we're different races. We should hate each other. Relativism, the truth is whatever you want it to be. You can make it up yourself. There's no truth out there. Feminism, that sexes are interchangeable. So never mind that what you're born as. Transgenderism, that I am the sex I feel like I am. Hedonism, living for pleasure, whatever thrill, whatever floats your boat. You'd think with all the disaster that these demonic ideas have caused, the now long track record of destroyed lives, the wars, the murdered political prisoners, the millions of aborted babies, the dissolved marriages, the lives that are just wasted, living for nothing other than making a few more dollars and getting stuff, the people who have been mutilated in the vain attempt to become the other sex, the miserable, angry, lonely people realize that they need to abandon their failed ism and turn to God. But incredibly, they don't. They're too hard-hearted. So they stay miserable and angry, wanting to die, but not able yet. So those people are not killed by the plagues of those demonic forces. Still, despite all the torment that they suffer, they do not repent, says, of the works of their hands. In verses 20 and 21. They refuse to let go of their sexual immorality. They're just convinced that's the life of freedom, or whatever the word they use for it. This living life of sexual immorality, that's the life to live. It's made them miserable. They can't figure that out. And they stay in it. The life of abortions or of violence or of drugs or delusions. They still don't give up worshiping demons and idols of gold and silver and bronze and stone and wood, which cannot see or hear or walk. In verse 20, that is, they live for things. They live for chasing dollars, for covetousness, which is idolatry. While literal idolatry still lives on in our modern world, even though it is, as mocked here, it's irrational. They still don't turn from their murders, like their abortions, or repent of their sorceries, like their drugs, their psychedelics, or their sexual immorality, or their thefts. It's made them miserable, left them in pain. But they don't turn from it. God shouts to us in our pains, said C.S. Lewis. But people are so in love with their sin, so deceived by their sin, so deluded by these ideologies, that without God's grace, they still don't hear him shouting in their pains, no matter how painful their sin has made their life. Where are we? After the 6th trumpet, there is again Just like with the seals, there's an interlude. We would have been expecting next, rapidly, a seventh trumpet for it to all end, but instead there's a break, there's a pause. Instead of going immediately to the end, we wait for a while as God seals his people. And that's where we are. We're in this world right here, a world where rivers rise and sweep away little girls at a camp in Texas. A hurricane incredibly destroys much of western North Carolina. How does that work? A couple of years ago, a hailstorm struck this building and punched holes in our skylights, so that a few weeks later, a downpour flooded while we were here, while we were in it. It's as though nature itself is rebelling against us. And then there's this flood of worse things than the natural disasters, this flood of satanic lies. Maybe on the one hand, we're just material, so just live for money or for pleasure alone. On the other hand, we're not material, we're not physical at all. We can identify ourselves as another sex if we want to. We can ignore the humanity of another race or of the preborn if we want to. And the result has been nothing other than misery and death. That's where our culture is. Yet, instead of turning back to God, many people are doubling down on the satanic lies that are destroying them. That's where we are. And unless we are marked by God, we're set aside by him, by grace, that's where we'll be, in misery and in death. But if God has sealed you, you're protected. Jesus said, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Is that where you're at?